So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here for this EUPRERA Talk session dedicated to one of the most relevant questions in our field today. So, how academia and professional practice can co-evolve in an age shaped by digital transformation. My name is Grazia Mortarelli, and I lead the Digital Transformation and Public Relation thematic network within EUPRERA. And I have the honor and the pleasure of moderating this session. I am not alone. Let me begin by introducing our two distinguished speakers. So I am with Anna Adi, Professor of Public Relations and Corporate Communication at Quadriga University of Applied Science, and Isabella Brusati, Executive Consultant, and Isabella Brusati and Associates with a long experience in change management field, but not only. So, digital transformation is not simply a technological shift. I think that it represents a structural and cultural reconfiguration of how organizations operate, how publics behave, and how communication practitioners engage with complexity. So in this evolving context, the boundaries between theory and practice have becoming increasingly permeable. So we have seen, especially during our last conference at EUPRERA. So this webinar that is a part of the digital transformation sub-series of EUPRERA Talks is designed to explore these intersections. So our goal, and I think that I can talk on behalf of also my colleague, is to foster a forward-looking dialogue, moving beyond the traditional knowledge transfer toward a more genuine co-creation. So I have a first questions for my two speakers. So the first question is the same for both. So I can ask it to Anna to start this conversation. So, and the question is, how can we address and incorporate the professional challenges practitioners face into academic teaching and research?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Grazia, for having me. How can we incorporate the professional challenge into teaching? That's a tricky question, right? And I have three answers to that. I will try to be as concise as possible. The easier threshold to incorporate these challenges is to make them seen. And by making them seen, it means that academics would build closer relationships with those in the professional fields. And the easiest way to do that is to invite them into the classroom, right? That's, I think, the easiest threshold. So the more networking interactions like these, the more opportunities to bring practitioners into the classroom, the more chances that these issues are being seen. Now, here's the thing. In order for this relationship to work, so at point one, right, what would be really, really important is to ensure that when practitioners do come into the classroom, that they're candid about their challenges. And so that means that they do show the good and the bad. And particularly, for those who work in marketing communications and everything that's related with creative and persuasive communication, there's a great tendency to show the shiny rather than the dark side. So that's number one, bring them into the classroom. Number two, depending on the level where you're teaching, do try to find ways in which, at the level of the students that you're approaching, you might be able to embed practitioner challenges. So in this case, it means that a homework has a practitioner assignment, that you have live pitches into the classroom, whatever it is that would bring your students at the level that they are, whether it's bachelor's, master's, or doctoral, closer to the practice. And finally, I think the more complicated bit is when we have achieved that sort of relationship and threshold where the collaboration is continuous. And allow me, before Isabella can share her thoughts and perspectives, to share one story with you, something that I have found particularly useful, and I've moved away from that. I used to teach in England in the past. I used to teach a course called Digital Communication Strategies to undergraduate students. And what we've done were a few things, right? digital communication strategies meant that I was expecting students to do things that were related to developing communication strategies. So what I did, we had a live assignment. They had to find local businesses that they could pitch to and say, we could run your social media and strategy campaign for the next 6 months. So that was the pitching level. They had to actively convince the people in the community. The assignment was to do this the day-to-day, but reflect on what they have achieved. Then they got a grade not on how successful they were in implementing those things. They were very welcome to fail, right? And that came with plenty of challenges with the clients that they had acquired, but the reflection of the lessons learned. But in order to take this a step further, what we've created a long time ago was a digital communication award. So then the things, these assignments that were the best, okay, I was the judge in that case. What we did then is set up a little award within the community, inviting practitioners to review then, and then the students had to pitch again and present. And so then there was an award that was independent, therefore, of the grade that they've received. So in this sense, you see, you had several steps of practice. And then, of course, those students who actually won the awards had much stronger contacts within the community, within the professional areas. And so we've not only co-created, but also contributed to how it went. So I hope these 3 steps are going to, at least in my view, they're fairly easy ways in which you can upgrade this to get to a level where this digital transformation is being lived and not only talked about.
Thank you so much, Anna. So, Isabella, professional perspective, what do you think about?
Well, I think actually that Anna's 3 steps are absolutely what we should do as professionals, in the sense that it's very important to bring in real life examples. And what I really like when collaborating with universities, whether it is undergraduates or master's degree, is that people bring in a new perspective, because sometimes in the company, we are setting our own ways, we see things in our own ways, and actually getting an external perspective, it's very refreshing. What I usually find very helpful is to work in an agile way. So literally, because usually when we implement digital transformations, is actually done in sprints and releases, etc., is actually using the same methodology when it comes to working with students, whether it is undergraduates or at master level. So literally is to start with a brief. That is something that is what we are really working on in the organization. So not a case study that is based on something that, no, is literally, because in this way, it's also for the students to see and to experience what it is like working in a real life environment. So it's literally starting with the brief, starting with the constraints, whether it's in terms of budget, whether it is in terms of time, getting them, for example, to work as stakeholder mapping, and then literally is to identify the KPIs. So again, involving them in what are not what I call the vanity metrics, but something that is really hard and, something that is also coming from the board, so that again, students can see what companies really work on. And then is actually going through the sprint, and then, so sprint can last, for example, 4 weeks or 8 weeks, depending, of course, on what we are working on. And then literally is to do the review and basically, like in a real agile environment, is to pick what works and what is not working. And then again, is to start a new cycle. So in the past, I've done something like this, and I noticed that it does work. Probably one of the challenges is to align the speed of the business to the, let's say, curriculum or the speed of a course when it comes to, for example, university, because the two do not necessarily go at the same pace. But again, it's something that can be discussed and it's something that can be agreed, and to get a positive outcome for both parties. But I do actually think that the pilot and the agile can definitely be a good option, especially when applied to a real life example with real life constraints. And as Anna was saying, this actually strengthens a lot also the relationship between the university and the company, because we as professionals also have the chance to see people in action. So, at a future stage, there might also be opportunities for those that align with the culture and with the requirements of the organization, maybe to start a professional collaboration in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anna, do you want to add something?
Right, you got me there. Isabella made a few really interesting points, and I just think of obviously the context in which I currently work, and that is delivering teaching into executive level MBAs with people of a different sort of caliber and experience. And when we teach in incredibly compact modules, right? So unlike having the benefit of a semester, like the example that I gave from England, where you can build that sort of agility and strategy, I usually have 4 days, right? So 4 days to change the world, and twice on a Saturday, preferably, because we teach weekends as well. So these time constraints that you mentioned become even more challenging when you teach in a very non-traditional way, the way we do. So that means that there are a few things that, as an academic, I would like to see from practitioners. There's a wish list, Isabella, then, you will be the Christmas elf, and maybe you help out to deliver this. And that is a more active engagement from industry and businesses coming forward to say, I have a problem, I have a challenge that I would like you with your students to help me address, rather than the approach that I have more often encountered, which is I'm going to show you how it's done because you're in academia and you have no idea, or you live in an ivory tower. Of course, these are very extreme cases. Yeah. But having mentioned those extreme cases, we do work with in many parts in Europe still. And research does show that there's a disconnect in appreciation between what academics think that they do and deliver when it comes to useful education for the future, and what practitioners recognize in being useful education. And for public relations and communication, the field that I'm in, this is incredibly dire, because if we do want to train people to work in PR, but then we do discount the education that we provide, then what are we doing? So in this sense, cases that really need a solution would be wonderful. Then we can really work together. But that also means from both parties an acceptance that things might not work, so that your success is not something that will probably happen, and that success is not only the only thing, right? This trajectory, because Isabella, you mentioned measurement and evaluation, right? In public relations and comms, we very often assume that the only good metrics are the ones that grow and they're positive, right? Reality says that, if you have growth, you have a down. If you have positive, you have a negative. So you have combinations of all those four. And acceptance of that brings that element of co-creation with the learning. And then the learning is of everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much. So absolutely interesting reflection. It seems that, probably in the past, integration could be intended as a sort of adding a practical example to a lecture, but now it seems to be like redesigning our learning and research ecosystem so they can mirror the complexity of contemporary organizations. So digital transformation, I think that it pushes us towards adaptive, iterative, porous model of knowledge production. This is what also, like Isabella said, about especially the new forms of organization. So your insight remind me that the real professional challenges, I was thinking about ethical tensions, technological frictions, organizational constraints. This should be essential raw material for academic inquiry, not only external case studies. So thank you so much. I think that we can move to the question 2. Isabella, I would like to start with you, because it's about, in your opinion, what can academia as an organizational system learn from professional environments undergoing transformation?
Yeah, I think actually that Anna made a great point in that sometimes there might be some, I would say, resistance from the professional world in including academia because it's maybe too theoretical. And I think that it's not the case because of course theory is also based on observation of what is going on, and of course there are some criteria, and the experiment, let's say, is done and the research within a specific I would say environment. What I think that academia could do is start speaking the language of the business, because especially nowadays, CEOs or senior leaders, when it comes to their tenure, actually it has shortened significantly. So they need to actually show the board that they can bring in results very, very fast. Sometimes academia is perceived as, it takes a lot of time, they have to review things. And to be honest, it can be also an incorrect perception from the side of the business. So when trying to get and cooperate, is academia basically showing and making a case of actually we can be partners because we speak the same language and we understand basically what your concerns are. We can bring results faster or actually experiment, but also when it comes to real life organizations, we don't know whether something is going to be successful or not. But what can be learned is speaking the language of the senior leaders and all the main stakeholders. And it's something that also happens within an organization. For example, I work as a change manager. If I start talking about adoption and usage, my basically circle looks at me like this going, huh? They want to know, okay, we need actually to get people on board because otherwise this is gonna cost us money. So it's academia, basically, especially when it comes to PR, marketing, etc., is how to, apologies to say that, but is how to package yourself as a true partner that can actually bring in value rather than me as someone working in a business thinking, oh gosh, they're gonna slow me down and I got to explain them this, that, and the other. So you are not slowing me down, you're adding value, but I need to understand how you from academia are going basically to do that without me basically slowing down, let's say, the pace, and without basically compromising, let's say, the probability that we are going to achieve success, because I actually have to have some resources that deal with students. And again, there is this perception that student means someone that is still learning, that basically has got less experience, while actually there are people that, are very on the ball. And again, they can bring in the latest theories, the latest researches, the latest basically way of working that maybe someone in an organization has not even tried, because we are set in our own way.
Thank you so much. So Anna, your opinion about?
I've taken a few notes, and I have, maybe at the beginning of my career, I would have more closely agreed and aligned with Isabella. I find myself at a point in my career where I see that the benefit of academia is to invite different perspectives into the process and maybe intentionally slow you down. So allow me to put a bit things into perspective. Some of the ways that you've described working, to me, have many cultural patterns embedded in them and preferences into what we focus on, right? I mean, my German students definitely know that I laugh quite a lot about how Germans focus on the process, and we do not quite know what the outcome is. There are other parts in Europe where the focus is a lot more on the outcome, and then we'll figure the process, right? So that one of the things that I have found myself as an academic, and as you figured, I work and I exist right now exactly at this boundary of training executives who, for whatever reason, they come back to school, is a great need for higher reflections and reflected practice. So that means their coming back to school is an opportunity for me to make them stop and think. And stopping and think when everything is really, really fast is not necessarily slowing things down, is supposed to help them in these highly volatile and uncertain times to think carefully about, where they're going and how they're going. So we're dismantling assumptions. We are confronting data that we have or blind spots that we have in our data. And these are things that academia can bring. Equally, one of the things that we do in my classrooms, and that, again, yes, I do understand that this is slow, but we look at, welcome to my pet peeve, thought leadership research. And thought leadership research from a research perspective skips over all the elements that give legitimacy to research. Elements of method, elements of data and sampling in particular, so data collection and sampling, elements that would clarify how the data has been analyzed. So all these thought leadership pieces, just look out there and maybe you'll find, I have probably 2 examples out of many, that will tell you what was the question asked to whom, how they've analyzed it, and we'll give you the questions into that. Otherwise, it's going to be 100% of this panel agrees on an issue, but it's just the 3 of us compared to, however many participants we're having, compared to, the whole European academia agrees, but it's just the 3 of us, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, what I'm really saying is that while I do understand that the business's purpose and focus is to move fast, the benefit that academia brings is critical thinking, is thoroughness, and that thoroughness brings legitimacy to the claims that businesses make. And with that is a change of perspective. So I wouldn't quite discount that. Actually, the professionals that can say, look, we'll invite academia because we need this, we need to see the world differently, then I think we're in a better place. We're learning anyways to move faster, but I don't think, you can rush the delivery of a piece of research, for instance, just because you have a deadline when you don't have enough data, right? Then we end up in the slope of disinformation and misinformation and all that. Yeah. So I like how you're thinking. I still would say, let's take a pause and think again.
Absolutely.
Okay, so great. So we can say, okay, from one side, what I see is that if university want to stay relevant, they need to embrace agility, break silos, embed probably digital literacy systematically, cultivate, how we can say, organizational readiness for change that mirrors what we observe in practice. But from the other side, what I see is a professional can learn from the academia probably the importance of a critical distance, the ability to step back from urgency and look at the problems with analytical clarity. So I think that they can learn methodological discipline. That means conceptual depth, reflecting thinking. So because a digital transformation, for instance, moves quickly, but understanding it requires the slow, structured intelligence that probably the academic inquiry could provide. So thank you both for this interesting perspective. Before going to the question 3, because it is arrived at a comment, so I would like to make probably this conversation. It could be, so great, Manuela, thank you for the comment. She says, so thank you for the important topics. Can you speak more on the future skills for communication professionals? Any instruments and tools at academia to meet more the business needs? This is a question. I don't know if who wants to start replying. Isabella, do you want to try?
Yeah.
What kind of instrument and tools you expect to meet probably your business needs? You are the professional side, of course.
An easy answer would be artificial intelligence, but I don't think that that's the answer. I actually think that the real answer is emotional intelligence.
Okay.
So it's going back actually to what Anna was saying, I think that there is a difference between the speed of the business, as I was saying earlier. So, we want everything fast done, the speed of light, etc. But working, for example, on the people side of, for example, of change initiatives, I think that when it comes to communication, when it comes to basically engagement, what makes the difference is actually understanding the needs of the others, having empathy, understanding basically the soft skills. This is something that artificial intelligence at the moment cannot do. And maybe in the future it will change. I don't know. I'm not a specialist of artificial intelligence. It's very good, with data. I mean, it can, for example, provide information around, I actually heard that some people use AI as a sort of a therapist, which I find really interesting. But what is missing is actually the real emotional element. And as someone that actually does communication as a professional, I think that at the moment, what makes actually the real difference between us as human and technology that can definitely support us with speed, with higher level of productivity, is actually our emotions.
Thank you so much, Anna.
I was, while you were talking, I had to go and look through my archives. A few years ago, we've conducted here at Quadriga a Delphi method study with European practitioners, asking them about the skills, among other things. So the skills meaning competence, knowledge, and abilities that communication professionals should have by 2025. Grazia have shared that report with you because it's interesting, because we are in 2025, right? We started asking these questions about 7 years ago. And artificial intelligence came at the top of the list, Isabella, but not the top of the list as first place, but rather digital competencies. And so digital competencies, I think they go a little bit deeper. So competencies or literacies, because we need to talk about, if we think of AI, how AI works, where the data set is coming from, how is it trained, if we keep the human in the loop, how is it verified? And now, as you know, we have loads of studies out there that do indicate that AI can talk into you, sort of your own culture, replicating, can sort of figure out, based on learned memory, your quirks and turns, trying to please you or the opposite. So there are many repercussions that we're still observing, but for communicators in particular who are in the space of persuasive communication, has both benefits and risks. What's interesting about the PR 2025 study is that what we asked back in the day was not only what do you think the skills and competencies should be for 2025, but we asked them in terms of trends and how should communicators meet them. So it was, but we asked different trends, right? Because when you say trends, people think of, I don't know, global warming, maybe. Yeah. So we had very specific questions about technological trends, social trends, and business trends. So business trends, as far as I recall off the top of my head, was understanding business still quite important. And social trends, I think polarization was already being on the radar. So I go back. With the reflection of that, and I've sent you, Grazia, another link. We've completed another study 3 years ago called The Future of PR and Their Social Impact. There are a few things that we've learned, and I will get back to the question that we had there on instruments and tools. We've learned that it's a great benefit to try to think in terms of time scale. So immediate, short, medium, long term, and to try to think in terms of difference between impact and value. Impact is the hard numbers, the return of investment, the whatever the KPI, money in, money out, energy in, energy out, whatever you can measure. But value is what I make of that. And what we've learned in that value and impact are not necessarily correlated. The example that I give everybody is me going back to doing some sport after the holidays. The the value is high, the impact is quite negative on the short term, right? But I do this for the positive promise, for the positive value. And there are things the other way around. We might do complete harm, therefore, in the way. Think of my muscles aching, right? But that value. So this sort of volatility, right? The things that are not necessarily as straight. So now I come to the point. What we've developed, Thomas Tuchel and I, bringing all that thinking together, is a framework. It's still there to be tested. So watch this space, because I think I will come back to all of you listening, and that means Isabella Grazia are on the line as well. We came up with a framework that still maintains the PR traditional workflow in terms of from input to activity, output, outcome, and impact and value. But we've embedded in it reflection loops. So at every point, similar to what you talked, Isabella, about, these sprints. Every time when you have a review, we said, well, we need to include a reflection moment called what if, so that you think, what if our data is wrong? What if our data is insufficient? What if our interpretation is incorrect? What if? What do we do with that what if? Which means that you can pivot at whatever you are in that point. The way is not always forward, but it gives you an opportunity to go back. And one of the other things that we've done with this, we have a web app preview created with Claude. Thank you very much. What we've also included in there the reflection questions that would be for the team and the individual. But what we also have are recommended uses of AI at that stage. So, you're at analysis stage, maybe you do a stakeholder mapping and analysis and you try to go through changing of perspective. You're at the implementation stage, maybe you try to test those messaging and the message house, but from the perspective of these stakeholder personas, so that you do not go with a belly button feeling, as I call it. So then we look at embedding this reflection, which goes your way with emotional intelligence in a sense, but that requires a much deeper introspection and collaboration. So we talk about humility and opening these spaces where we talk about what we expect and what might not come. And AI becomes therefore a facilitator, a background, rather than the thing that we're focusing on. Because, we've all watched Terminator, I assume, and we know how that ends. And I don't think we would want to get there. So I think that's what I would add in this case. We've sort of created the tool, because everybody has a tool, but our tool doesn't give you an answer. It just asks you a bunch of other questions more, so that you find your own answer that is appropriate to you and your context.
That's great.
Great. Thank you, Anna. So I will add on the comments, or try to add on the comments on YouTube, the 2 links that you shared with me. So we will try to absolutely share with the audience. So thank you for your comment. We will try to go on. We have the last questions that probably in some way you anticipated something by answering to the comment. That is, what are the mutual benefits of fostering stronger ties between academia and professional practice? So Isabella, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that in today's world, yesterday I was reading a very interesting article of the Harvard Business Review, and how AI fundamentally is, making people performing faster. And they were saying that nowadays, one of the issues that we might have is that basically some of the, especially middle layer people, will disappear. So basically managers. And there will be also the opportunity for people at the starting level to take basically on the something a little bit more strategic, because the actual, basic skills can be, or activities can actually be performed by AI. So what actually academia could gain out of this is to keep their curriculum current, because it's actually getting people already, because Anna earlier was talking about critical thinking. So it's actually something that can be even valued more by an organization, because it's not all about, can you do the basic thing, or, putting the data together. Fine. I mean, I can actually get AI to do that. And there was also an interview with a lady that does recruitment, and she was saying one of the things that we take into consideration is to see how also people at an entry level are making use of this spare time that actually AI is creating. And again, is in academia, developing those skills that then people can actually implement when they go into an organization, so that I can show basically that I'm ready, because I have those skills and I have those competencies that have already been basically developed in a very structured way. So this is actually the link that yesterday I was thinking about it and was like, oh, this is really interesting on how it can help. Also, academia can get basically access to data, of course, depending on the cases and what basically companies allow academia to work on. So again, cases that are up to date. So for example, last year we worked with companies such and such, and something that is fresh, because nowadays, again, people are looking for what I can immediately apply when I go into the market, the job market, and the companies are like, what can we get so that you are already up to speed and you can bring in value. And as I was saying also earlier, is this possibility of not only offering students the possibility to work on real life examples, but also to create a network, because this collaboration, they may last, for example, I don't know, 6 months or whatever it's going to be, depending on the project, can also give the opportunity to get to know also senior leaders in an organization, and therefore being identified as a high potential talent for that specific company. But even if it's not being hired by them, is also creating this network. And nowadays, I mean, the world is really, really small. You don't know what is going to happen, for example, in 3 years or in 4 years. So maybe you don't get hired by this company now, but then maybe the head of whatever it is moves to another organization and they go, you know what? I work with that person, really smart, really, I like the way that they work in team, proposals and all the rest of it. We go and actually get them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna.
I've made a few notes because yes, we do go back to this idea that networks are good, guest connections are good. I've made a note to that. Very, very often, I've seen that in academia, there's this assumption that the bigger the name of the guest invited, then the better, right? So I call it the shiny object syndrome. And I keep on thinking, and this is why a lot of my career I've actually worked with the small and medium enterprises. Right now in Germany, as you know, what they call the Mittelstand, right? The middle sort of ranging companies and family-owned companies are highly praised in the German economy. They're seen as the driver. And so to Isabella, to what you said, for academics that want to build those networks for their students, I would say do not discount your local community. There are plenty of businesses in your area, small, medium, huge city that you are, area, neighborhood, that would probably find that connection with the university more valuable than a big organization that can pick and choose, that might have a budget. So I think the success, going back to where we started at the beginning of the hour, with the Digital Communication Award and the Digital Communication Strategies course that we've had, and by the way, we also had a few hiccups or crises close, right? But still, I count that as a success. That was because we used the connections that we had in the community, right? So that means small and medium businesses, the mom and pop restaurant, the grandpa tea shop, whatever it was there. So do not discount local NGOs, local community, local businesses that are there. They might benefit and appreciate even more someone at the university reaching out. You mentioned data, and I've made that point, and as you've noticed, I've scribbled through. inviting academia to carry research for you, if you don't have the resources, that is a wonderful thing in a sense, because it's a powerful thing. It recognizes your vulnerability on the one hand, but it recognizes the opportunity of that collaboration, again, in the community. And there are ways in which you can negotiate with an experienced researcher. What is the level of access and detail that you can offer, or what is the level of information that you have? We're encouraging, for instance, at our executive level students to use their organizations as much as they can as homes for their research. But I have very, very often conversations about, you're a researcher right now, you need to manage this dual role that you have, and no, you cannot allow your boss to go back through your thesis and say, I don't like this paragraph, can we change it? So your thesis is yours. And again, that sort of neutrality, Grazia, you mentioned that, this critical distance, because I don't really think we're neutral. This critical distance is beneficial. Two more things I thought of. And I've seen, and I've been incredibly lucky to be part of that. And I'm not saying that because I've been part of that. I've seen several big organizations who have workforces that are big. I'm like, mini cities and villages, if I think of that. They have learning days. And every once in a while, an academic gets the pleasure of being invited to rattle, the assumption cage. So these sort of master classes and in-house events are incredibly useful, and they're cathartic, both for the academics and the participants there, because they might be in what they might perceive as a bit of a safer space for learning and experimentation, where they're just with colleagues. You have to go over the fact that, oh, my colleague is watching, so I can't say something stupid. But on the other hand, you can ask questions that are relevant to the organization or that are pain points that you would not necessarily do at a conference elsewhere. So these sort of in-house events and master classes, that means that even for the event industry that caters for practitioners, having the odd academic, come and rattle that cage is incredibly useful. And last but not least, I have here one more, and that is awards. Again, having academics sit in whatever sort of awards, or having, academic awards where you reach out to practitioners to help out judge students' work, those are wonderful catalysts for collaboration and connection. As an academic, you get an insight into what people qualify as being best practice. And yes, you might be a bit more critical. I found myself creating a bit of trouble in the awards panels that I've been sitting in. But equally to my teaching, that sort of insight that has been the bread and butter and the fuel and inspiration for the things that I've done. And the other way around, being able to create an award, whether it's a master thesis award, whether it's a course award where you have live pitches and whatever it is, that is incredibly, incredibly useful, because that when the people come together, when they see the work, when they get an opportunity to discuss about that work, we go back, Isabella, to what you said, that connection is being established, right? And then people get to know each other a little bit beyond just the LinkedIn bio or the whatever platforms of preference might be. So these would be the things that I would add to all those wonderful things that you've mentioned, and I think we're on a good way.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. So maybe we can say, but this is probably obvious, that collaboration is not an optional extra, but is a shared necessity. So I think that co-created research, practice-based learning, continuous dialogue generate value for both sides. So, and especially because we are in this digital accelerated environment, no single community can rely solely on its own perspective. So the future of our field probably depends on our ability to build this collaboration that are strategic, long-terms, and intellectually generous. So thank you so much. Okay, so we arrive at the end of this discussion, but before we close, I'd like to invite questions again from the audience. Absolutely, please feel free to raise your hand, so to write your questions in the chat. So we would love to bring your perspective into our conversation. In the meanwhile, this digital transformation and public relation thematic network in EUPRERA, we are shaping the program for 2026. So if you like to contribute, propose themes, collaborate, you are warmly invited to reach out to EUPRERA or directly to me. So absolutely feel free. Okay, one question. So, given the speed of digital transformation, how can practitioners and academics avoid developing parallel but disconnected skill sets? Are there specific digital or analytical competencies to add to what you said before that you believe both sides should now consider foundational? So this is a question probably to enrich our discussion about skills and competencies.
Yeah, actually, this is the problem of the silo, which is something actually that we see also in organization. So it can happen that, for example, a part of the organization is working on something, and then another part of the organization is working on exactly the same thing, and the two don't talk basically to each other, especially with big organization. So to me, again, it's not based on any research or anything. It's actually based on my personal opinion. It's being curious and is actually being open-minded. As Anna was saying earlier, for example, academia can help executive to stop and decelerate and think. So to create basically a chamber where people can finally say, okay, fine. So I think that the skill that could actually help bridging this academia and basically the business is having executives and having decision maker that can be true sponsors for the collaboration between these two worlds. And also when academia is brought into the organization, is not to actually say, okay, what kind of projects can we give them? And maybe something that is not particularly, let's say, fancy, because again, we go back to, the mentality sometimes the executive have, of something being slow and all the rest of it. It's genuinely up to leaders nowadays to understand and have an open mind and a skill set to see things at 360 degrees. The problem, it goes down to also the culture of an organization, because if the culture of the organization is actually giving and rewarding people that actually do fast, it's very hard for someone in an organization to develop this kind of mentality and most of all to implement it. So I think that it's a wider, let's say, conversation around what is the culture of an organization nowadays, and when we will start actually promoting, also as a KPI for an individual to be evaluated within an organization, the fact that they are genuinely open and willing to start a real conversation and collaboration with academia. What I am seeing in a lot of organizations is that this is a rarity, because again, executives are mostly into, I need to bring in results, otherwise next year I'm not going to be here anymore. So it's down to the single individual, yes, but it's also down to the culture of the organization from my point of view. So sorry, a very long answer.
No, thank you so much. Anna, you want to add something?
You saw that I brought a book. As you can tell, I have my books up here. I brought it out of my library. It's called May Contain Lies, and it's written by Alex Edmans. And it is absolutely wonderful because it speaks about the consequences of bias. And it uses the entire book is about the ladder of misinference. So where do we make mistakes? Jumping from, a statement is not a fact is not data is not evidence is not proof. So both researchers and practitioners, I think this would be a wonderful book to consider, because it talks about the jumps that we're making to tell a story, to make sense of complex situations and data, right? And so that goes into let's try to think of how do we ask smarter questions, how do we find our ways out of situations that are uncomfortable, and most importantly, why is it that we want simple solutions and quick? And I think that applies for academia. For academia, we want to sometimes go way too deep into things, and then get bogged into describing the process probably too much. On the practitioner side, drawing on stereotypes presented here, we might forget those intermediate steps, and therefore mistakes can happen at either step. So how do we think, and that means how do we make sense of complexity? I bring another book. It's part of a trilogy. It also influenced a lot of my thinking. It's Sam Knowles, Asking Smarter Questions. It's called How to Be an Agent of Insight. Again, highly relevant both for communications, in academia or outside, working with data. And I do thoroughly appreciate the work of John Cook. If you haven't seen John Cook and his Cranky Uncle app, which looks at, it's way too far in there in my library, that looks at the framework of disinformation. So again, cherry picking, conspiracy theories, impossible expectations, all of these ways of thinking and ways of formulating what we expect, either from ourselves or others, I think would be incredibly useful no matter where you would be, whether academia or practice, whether in comms or elsewhere.
Okay, great. So we have time probably for a quick but big questions, I think, because aside, many collaborations fail not for lack of ideas, but because institutional structure get in the way. So from your experience, what governance mechanism or incentives actually help sustain academia practice partnership over time? This could be a very big chapter, I think, in terms of discussion. I don't know if you will have some, some insight to share.
Isabella, I'll jump in here very, very quickly. I think we have two sort of different worlds of expectations, right? And in both worlds, we're counting something. And I found it at times a source of frustration, that what this counting is. In some instances, we're counting hours of work, of whatever that work is, which means looking busy is highly important. In other cases, we're counting outcomes, contacts, whatever it is. And I think if we would manage to talk with one another at these onboarding stages, what the expectations are, what the deliverables would be, what is the change that we can both contribute. So both academia and practitioners, we might be able to develop a roadmap that kind of, and again, I do not like the idea of a compromise. A compromise to me is a lose-lose. Then I do something worse, you do something worse, but it's okay. Is the solution in the middle. But I think if we would have those open conversations at the beginning of the project, acknowledging that people work for different success, right? What that means, one of the solutions would be to negotiate something that is agreeable and deliverable on both sides. So that we go back to agility and flexibility in a sense, and this acceptance on both sides, that being way too thorough, it might be in the way.
Yeah.
I'm not. The governance is good, but
No, absolutely.
but a tick box might not.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree with you that it must be a win-win and everyone understanding the pros and what are the constraints. Because again, the business might get a little bit frustrated because it's like we need to delve deeper into this data. And actually, the academia can get very frustrated by, okay, listen, we got enough, we need to move on. So it's how we balance this basically modern requirements is actually these two worlds and how we can communicate in a way that we are speaking again the same language, taking into consideration what are the requirements, so that it's going to be a win for the business and it's going to be a win for academia.
Okay, thank you so much. Last comments from YouTube. In your experience with organizational challenges related to digital transformation, do you think academia underestimates or misinterprets?
Ooh.
In your experience.
Yeah, in my experience, yeah, because it's actually a big thing. I think that, again, one of the elements that I see is the internal politics that plays a massive, but really a massive role. And sometimes it's, some decisions are driven not necessarily by the hard data, but is driven by the politics because of the stakeholders that in that moment basically can drive the whole thing. And for example, if you got a big digital transformation going on, sometimes it can last 4 or 5 years and your stakeholders are going to change. So maybe at the beginning, you got stakeholder A that has really a lot of power. So we go this direction. Then after 2 years, stakeholder A disappears from the scene. So maybe has a lower, importance, and you get stakeholder B all of a sudden. So sometimes it looks like things are illogical. Say, why are they doing this? They were going this direction and now all of a sudden they go in a different direction. It's because politics plays a massive role and is not necessarily a logical path. Sometimes is more like a internal balance and internal equilibrium that actually plays a big role. And if someone wants to actually play that game, you play with the rules. It's very hard for a single individual to change the rules of the game.
Okay. Anna, you want to add something?
Yeah, she's now figures, that I itch to add things. You mentioned internal politics, really interesting. And just as a side note, a lot of my teaching to executives covers dissent, how we formulate and how we go about dissent. And this what if model that I've mentioned earlier encourages people to keep what I call a dissent log. So that is that when we sit in meetings, we write down not only the decisions that we've taken and agreed, but also we have a list maybe of the decisions that we've dismissed and why, because, at some point we might have to come back with those. But there is an art to disagreement. And I think particularly in this polarizing time, which are a result of us thinking that personal opinion is more important than cohesion, that we need to find this sort of art of going back to disagreement. The other thing, going back to the question that was asked, and for the last 3 minutes that we have of our time, I've noticed something else. I've been asked to host AI workshops in the past. We spoke about digital transformation because that's what was fashionable. Organizations come and managers come with the idea that they want, again, the shiny new object and syndrome. And when I looked in, we talk about agentic AI right now, and we want to have all sorts of streamlined workflows and things do things together. And then you have a look and you figure that half of the archive is still in the basement in paper form.
True.
And so you realize, well, you know, or that we have this whatever file structure that is highly suspicious and duplicated. And it might be that people have an alternative structure, you know, that you tell them to keep stuff on your own server, and because they don't work, they've created their own whatever Dropbox file where they can share things. So as there's this vision versus the nitty-gritty. I cannot generalize, but my experience has been that people want everything that is shiny, and that sort of reflection and assessment sometimes is missing and makes that leap even more impossible, because it brings an element of frustration in the realization. I will finish with just recommending, there's a wonderful podcast. It's called Hidden Brain. See, I'm an academic. I'm full of resources. But the last podcast of Hidden Brain speaks about, they have a guest and they speak about the poetry and the plumbing. So poetry being the vision, and the plumbing is this nitty-gritty of how do we bring it there. And whether it's digital transformation on whatever shiny new term there is, you need to be able to bridge the vision with how are we going to do it step by step. So, you know, Isabella, going back to what you said, Germans like the process. Maybe people in your part of the world would like the outcomes. I think everybody should work together, because, you know, it's just by bringing those two things together, we see things happening.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so we come to an end. Thank you to our speaker. Thank you very much for this shared reflection. It was a pleasure to listen to you. Conversation continues in our organization, in our classrooms, and for sure in the activities of this network. So thank you, and see you for the next, for the next steps. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye. Thank you.